The first crack appeared at 2:17 in the morning, when my wife walked barefoot onto our balcony in Brickell, pressed a second phone to her ear, and whispered, "He's asleep. You can talk now." I wasn't asleep. I was 20 feet away in our bedroom, staring through the narrow reflection in the black television screen, while the blue light from Biscayne Bay trembled across the ceiling. Lauren had left the sliding door open by less than an inch, and through that gap I heard a man laugh softly before asking her whether she had packed the white one for Thursday. She turned toward the bedroom, and I shut my eyes before she could catch me watching. "Of course I did," she whispered. "You're the one who bought it." Then she said 3 words that made my chest tighten so hard I thought she might hear my ribs moving. "I miss Chicago," the man answered. "Then come home." Lauren stood outside for another 12 minutes. I counted every one of them by the glowing numbers on the alarm clock, lying perfectly still while the woman I had been married to for 6 years spoke to someone who believed another city was her home. "My name is Evan Hale. I was 28 then, and I made my living on YouTube. Not prank videos or gaming streams like people usually assumed when I said that. I ran a channel about luxury architecture, strange real estate disputes, abandoned resorts, and the stories behind expensive buildings. I had just crossed 8 million subscribers, which sounded glamorous until you saw me editing footage at 3 in the morning with cold coffee beside my keyboard and 12 browser tabs open. Lauren told people she worked remotely as a brand consultant for boutique hotels. That was believable because she always had decks to finish, clients calling from different time zones, and at least one business trip every month. Chicago, Atlanta, New York, sometimes Los Angeles. She had professional clothes in garment bags, loyalty points with 3 airlines, and an entire vocabulary of campaigns, deliverables, and launch meetings. For years, I never questioned any of it. Why would I? Her income appeared in our joint account on schedule. She knew enough about hospitality branding to speak convincingly, and she occasionally let me see polished presentations filled with logos and occupancy statistics. The story was complete. That was what made it dangerous. Now, I want you to imagine lying beside someone after hearing a sentence like, "Come home," not "come visit," not "I wish you were here." Home. One ordinary word, and suddenly every room around me felt like a stage set built to fool one person. Me. Lauren returned to bed at 2:31, smelling faintly of the citrus hand lotion she kept beside the balcony chair. She placed the second phone somewhere near her suitcase, slid under the sheet, and rested her palm against my shoulder as if she had every right to touch me. I kept my breathing slow. After a minute, she kissed the back of my neck and whispered, "Love you." I almost turned around. Every part of me wanted to ask who had been on the phone, what the white thing was, and why Chicago was home when we had lived in Miami since before our wedding. Instead, I murmured something that sounded like, "Love you too." That answer tasted like metal. The next morning, Lauren wore a pale green workout set I had never seen before and made scrambled eggs while humming an old song by The Cure. She had always hated 80s music. When I asked what it was, she glanced toward me a fraction too quickly and said, "No idea. It got stuck in my head from a reel." Then she asked whether I would be filming Thursday. I told her I had a full-day shoot at a waterfront mansion on Star Island, which was true, and her shoulders relaxed. It was a tiny movement, almost nothing, but when your job involves watching hours of footage for continuity errors, you learn to notice what changes between frames. "Perfect," she said. "I'll probably work from the co-working lounge downstairs. The apartment gets too quiet when you're gone." That was the second lie. The third arrived 10 minutes later when a calendar alert lit up her regular phone. The notification read Chicago Hotel Campaign, Final Review. Lauren covered it with her hand before I could look directly at it, then carried the phone into the bathroom. She started taking longer showers that week. She ordered 2 silk dresses and claimed they were samples a client wanted photographed. She began drinking espresso even though caffeine used to make her anxious. When I mentioned dinner at the Cuban place in Little Havana where we had celebrated our engagement, she said she was too tired. But that night I watched her spend 40 minutes deciding between 2 pairs of earrings for a late strategy call. These weren't proof by themselves. People change habits. They discover music. They buy clothes. They become protective of work. But once the first lie opens the door, all the harmless details start walking through it wearing different faces. I found the second phone on Wednesday afternoon. Lauren had gone downstairs to collect a grocery delivery, and I was looking for the spare battery to my drone inside the hall closet. Behind a stack of branded tote bags sat a gray Rimowa suitcase she used only for short trips. The front compartment was locked, which was strange because Lauren never locked luggage inside our apartment. I didn't force it. I didn't have to. The zipper pulls weren't fully aligned, leaving an opening wide enough for me to see a white charging cable and the corner of a dark blue phone case. When I heard the elevator bell in the hallway, I returned the suitcase exactly as I had found it and stepped into my office before she opened the door. That evening, I did something I'm still not proud of, but I won't pretend I regret it. I checked the location history on the tablet linked to our shared rideshare account. Lauren had become careful about using separate credit cards, but 3 months earlier she had ordered a car in Chicago through our household profile. The ride began at O'Hare and ended not at the Langham, where she claimed she always stayed, but at a residential tower in River North. 2 days later, another ride took her from that building to a pediatric dentist on West Fullerton. Pediatric dentist. We didn't have children. I sat there with my hand resting on the tablet, reading the destination over and over, trying to invent an innocent explanation. Maybe she had met a client there. Maybe the address belonged to another business in the same building. Maybe the app had mixed up the location. The mind becomes very creative when the alternative is accepting that your marriage might have an entire hidden floor beneath it. I searched the tower address. Condominiums. No marketing agency. No hotel group. Then I searched public photos tagged at that location, tenant reviews, property records, anything that might give me a name. I found nothing useful, but I did find a picture Lauren had posted 18 months earlier. She was standing in a Chicago restaurant beneath a wall covered in tiny brass birds, smiling beside 2 women she had introduced online as the best campaign team in the world. I enlarged the reflection in the window behind them. A man was taking the photograph. Tall, broad shoulders, charcoal jacket, face partly hidden by the phone. On his wrist was a silver watch with a bright orange strap. I had seen that watch before. Lauren kept a photograph from our 5th anniversary inside a leather folio in her desk. In the corner of that picture, reflected in a decorative mirror, the same orange strap appeared beside her shoulder. Whoever he was, he had been close enough to photograph us in Miami more than a year earlier. My stomach folded in on itself. Heat climbed from my collar to my face while my hands went cold against the desk. I tried to stand and had to sit back down because my legs weren't cooperating. There was no dramatic crash, no cinematic burst of anger. My body simply stopped feeling like it belonged to me. I could hear Lauren in the kitchen crushing ice for a drink. I could hear the blender start, then her voice singing that same Cure song. She sounded happy. That was the part that hurt most. Not guilty, not nervous, happy. If you've ever discovered that someone has been editing your reality while you were busy living in it, you already understand the humiliation. You don't only question them, you question your own memory. Every canceled dinner becomes suspicious. Every affectionate message starts looking rehearsed. Every time they called you paranoid or distracted suddenly feels like a small piece of training. I closed the photograph and wiped my recent searches before Lauren entered my office carrying 2 mango smoothies. She handed me one, leaned against my desk, and asked, "Are you excited about tomorrow's shoot?" I looked straight into her eyes and said, "Absolutely." She smiled. "Good. I miss seeing you excited." Then she reached down and ran her fingers through my hair. That tenderness nearly broke me. I wanted her to be cruel because cruelty would have made my next decision easier. Instead, she was warm, attentive, and completely practiced. That night I barely slept, but by sunrise I had made the restraint choice that shaped everything afterward. I wasn't going to confront her with fragments. I wasn't going to give her time to erase the second phone, rewrite the trips, call the man with the orange watch, or turn 6 years of marriage into a debate about whether I had misunderstood a rideshare receipt. I was going to learn the whole truth first. On Thursday morning, I loaded my cameras into my black Range Rover, kissed Lauren goodbye, and drove toward Star Island. She stood on the balcony waving until I turned onto Brickell Avenue. At 9:12, I texted her a photograph of the mansion's front gates and wrote, "Long day ahead. Don't wait up for lunch." At 9:26, I parked the Range Rover inside a rented garage near South Beach, changed into a faded Miami Heat shirt and an old baseball cap, then got into a silver Toyota Camry I had booked under the name of my production company. The shoot was real, but my cameraman and assistant could handle the exterior footage without me for 3 hours. My location-sharing phone remained inside the equipment case in the Range Rover. According to every digital trail Lauren could see, I was exactly where I said I would be. At 10:03, she emerged from our building wearing the white dress. It was fitted, sleeveless, and expensive enough that I recognized the designer from a sponsorship proposal I had rejected. She wasn't dressed for a co-working lounge. She carried the gray Rimowa suitcase and wore sunglasses despite the cloud cover. A dark Mercedes collected her near the service entrance instead of the main lobby. I stayed 4 cars behind as it crossed the MacArthur Causeway, passed the cruise terminals, and continued north toward Miami Beach. The Mercedes stopped outside a private marina near Sunset Harbor. Lauren stepped out, but she didn't take the suitcase with her. The driver opened his door. Tall, broad shoulders, white linen shirt, and on his wrist, bright against the steering wheel, was the orange watch. He walked around the car and kissed my wife like a man greeting someone who already belonged to him. Not a rushed kiss, not a guilty one. He held her waist, said something that made her laugh, then kissed her again while people passed on the sidewalk. I gripped the Camry's steering wheel until the seam pressed deep marks into my palms. My pulse became a heavy pounding behind my ears, and for one wild second I pictured opening the door, crossing the street, and dragging the truth out of both of them in public. I didn't move. Lauren and the man entered the marina through a members-only gate. 15 minutes later, they appeared on the upper deck of a 40-foot yacht named Second Chance. I photographed the registration number with a long lens from inside the car. The yacht belonged to a company called Halcyon Coastal Holdings. The company's registered manager was a 41-year-old man named Adrian Vale. His online profile described him as a hospitality investor splitting his time between Miami and Chicago. His Instagram was private, but his profile picture showed the same orange watch. I searched his name beside Lauren's. Nothing. Then I searched Adrian's company alongside the fake hotel clients she had mentioned over the years. 3 of those clients were shell brands registered by Halcyon. Another had never existed at all. The business trips weren't covering an affair that began recently. The business itself had been built to explain the affair. At 12:40, Lauren and Adrian left the marina separately. She returned to Brickell in a rideshare, wearing a loose cardigan over the white dress. He drove north in the Mercedes. I arrived at the Star Island property before my location phone had moved, filmed 2 interior segments, and went home just after 7 with sunburn on my neck and a plausible complaint about a malfunctioning gimbal. Lauren was cooking sea bass. She asked how the mansion looked. I described the marble staircase, the glass wine cellar, and the owner's ridiculous gold-plated faucets. Then I asked how her day had been. "Boring," she said. "Calls until 4. I barely left the apartment." She placed a plate in front of me and smiled. "You know, sometimes I envy you. At least your work gives you stories." I looked down at the sea base so she wouldn't see what passed across my face. She had no idea that she had just become the biggest story of my life. Over the next 3 weeks, I built my own second life beneath hers. I hired a private investigator named Rosa Delgado, a former insurance fraud examiner with a calm voice and an office above a locksmith in Coral Gables. I didn't tell her I wanted revenge. I said I needed documentation for a divorce, and at first, that was true. Rosa found Adrian's Chicago address, his companies, his travel history, and something I had never prepared myself to see. Lauren had been using the name Lauren Vale whenever she was with him. Hotel bookings, charity event guest lists, a fitness studio membership, even a grocery delivery profile. No marriage certificate existed between them, but socially, professionally, and privately, she had presented herself as his wife for nearly 4 years. For years, Lauren and I had been married for 6. In Chicago, there were people who knew her as Mrs. Vale. In Miami, there were people who knew her as Mrs. Hale. She kept clothes in both cities, celebrated birthdays with 2 different circles, and maintained separate social accounts under privacy settings designed to prevent overlap. The pediatric dentist had been for Adrian's 8-year-old nephew, whom Lauren sometimes collected from appointments because Adrian's sister believed Lauren was part of the family. Rosa slid the printed photographs toward me across her desk. In one, Lauren stood beside Adrian at a rooftop Christmas party, his arm around her waist. In another, she helped his mother cut a birthday cake. In a third, she wore a simple gold band I had never seen and leaned against him beneath a sign reading "Welcome Home." Lauren. "This isn't an affair," Rosa said quietly. "It's an alternate identity." Let me pause there because that distinction mattered. An affair is a hidden relationship inside your life. Lauren had built another life and made me the hidden relationship whenever she entered it. I wasn't merely the husband being deceived. In Chicago, I was the inconvenience she edited out. I asked Rosa one question. "Does Adrian know about me?" She hesitated, and that hesitation gave me the answer before she spoke. "He knows you exist," she said, "but I don't think he knows you're still her husband. From what I can tell, she told him you separated years ago and remained publicly friendly because of your channel and shared business interests." I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So he thinks I'm the ex." It appears that way. That changed the shape of my anger. Adrian wasn't innocent. The marina kisses, the secret companies, and the years of concealment told me that much. But he might not know the full scale of what Lauren had done. I could have sent him the marriage certificate that afternoon. I could have called him, exposed her, and watched their relationship detonate from a safe distance. I didn't. By then, I had noticed something in Rosa's report that felt far more useful than confrontation. Adrian had spent years trying to break into digital media. He had invested in 2 failed travel channels, pitched a luxury hotel series to 3 streaming platforms, and recently followed my production company from his private business account. He wanted access to what I had built. He wanted credibility, attention, and a doorway into my audience. Lauren had spent years slowly seducing him with the fantasy of a life she could never fully give him. I decided I would seduce him more carefully, with the one thing he desired even more than her: relevance. I told Rosa to keep documenting everything, contacted my divorce attorney, and began preparing an alibi for an act I hadn't fully planned yet. Then, on a humid Tuesday afternoon, I followed Adrian into the members' lounge of a hotel on Collins Avenue, pretended to recognize him from an investment panel, and offered him a seat at my table. His face brightened immediately. He had no idea he was shaking the hand of Lauren's husband. He only thought he had finally met the man who could make him famous. Adrian's handshake was firm, warm, and a second longer than necessary, the kind of handshake men use when they want to communicate confidence while calculating what you might be worth to them. "Evan Hale," he said, settling into the leather chair across from me. "I know your work. That episode about the abandoned resort in the Bahamas was incredible." I smiled as though I hadn't spent the previous evening studying every public interview he had ever given. "You're Adrian Vale, right? Halcyon Coastal?" The flash of satisfaction in his eyes told me I had chosen the correct bait. He wanted to be recognized. "That's me," he said. "Mostly boutique hospitality and waterfront redevelopment." I nodded toward the untouched espresso beside his laptop. "I've been researching a series on developers who rescue troubled properties. Your name came up." That wasn't entirely a lie. His name had come up dozens of times, just never during research for my channel. Adrian leaned forward. Within 5 minutes, he was describing a hurricane-damaged hotel he hoped to acquire near Marathon. Within 10, he was showing me architectural renderings. Within 20, he had casually mentioned that he spent part of every month in Chicago, although he never explained why. I acted impressed without becoming eager. That part mattered. Men like Adrian distrusted people who wanted them too quickly, but they became fascinated by anyone who appeared difficult to win over. So I checked my watch twice, disagreed with his projected renovation costs, and told him one of his proposed rooftop concepts looked better suited to Las Vegas than the Florida Keys. He stared at me for a second and then laughed. Finally, somebody says it. I let him pay for the coffee. Before we separated, he asked whether I would consider filming at one of his properties. I said, maybe. Send my team the details, and handed him a card with a direct number that appeared personal but routed through a separate production line. He texted 14 minutes later. Great meeting you. I think there may be something substantial we can build together. I waited until evening to answer. Lauren was on the sofa beside me, scrolling through restaurant reviews for our upcoming anniversary. When I wrote back, agreed. Let's keep talking. I watched her face while I sent it. She had no idea the message traveling from my phone was headed toward the man whose hand had rested on her waist at the marina. What do you think about Casa Tua? She asked. For the anniversary? Sounds perfect, I said. Do you want something intimate? She smiled and rested her feet in my lap. Very. If this sounds impossibly cold, understand that I wasn't calm because I had stopped hurting. I was calm because anger had finally given me a job. Every ordinary moment became part of the mask. I brought Lauren coffee in bed, asked about her imaginary clients, kissed her before leaving for shoots, and listened while she complained about deadlines attached to companies that existed only on paper. At night, when she slept beside me, I sometimes stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering whether the woman breathing against my shoulder had ever existed outside the role she performed for me. During the day, I gave myself fewer opportunities to wonder. I worked. My divorce attorney, Miriam Cole, began cataloging our assets and separating the income streams Lauren could legally reach. Rosa continued documenting the double life. My accountant copied 6 years of joint statements and found recurring payments disguised as consulting expenses. They weren't enormous amounts individually, $1,800 here, $3,200 there. But together they showed that Lauren had used nearly $74,000 from a company account partly funded by my channel to maintain her Chicago identity. Flights, wardrobe purchases, dinners with Adrian's family. Even the gold band she wore as Mrs. Vale had been purchased with money that passed through our marriage. That discovery turned a painful divorce into something sharper. Fraud, misappropriation, evidence. Meanwhile, I let Adrian believe our meeting had been chance. I invited him to tour a half-renovated Art Deco hotel in Mid-Beach with my production manager, then canceled 40 minutes before we were supposed to meet, blaming an urgent sponsor call. He went anyway. 2 days later, I asked his opinion about a property in Coconut Grove and spent an hour listening while he explained zoning restrictions I already understood. The following week, I included him in a private dinner with 2 architects and a travel platform executive I knew through the channel. I never promised him coverage. I simply allowed him to stand close enough to imagine it. That was the slow seduction. Not romance, access, recognition. The possibility that one introduction from me could turn Halcyon Coastal from a collection of obscure companies into a recognizable luxury brand. I learned what made him lean forward, what made him boast, and what made him nervous. Praise his instincts, and he became charming. Question his numbers, and he produced documents to prove himself. Mention that another developer had better media instincts, and Adrian would reveal plans he had previously called confidential. He wanted my approval with an intensity that would have embarrassed him if he could see it from the outside. The strangest part was that I began to understand how Lauren had kept him waiting for 4 years. Adrian didn't chase people. He chased locked doors. She had given him just enough of herself to make the rest feel like a prize. She told him the divorce was nearly final, that my public visibility made everything complicated, that one more sponsorship contract or tax year or channel milestone had to pass before she could leave Miami permanently. Every delay made him invest more deeply because admitting the truth would mean admitting that he had wasted years. I used the same weakness, only my promises involved cameras instead of love. One Friday, Adrian invited me onto Second Chance for drinks. I had expected the invitation eventually, but seeing the yacht's name in his message caused something ugly to move through me. I accepted. Before leaving, I told Lauren I was attending a creator networking event at a studio in Wynwood. She barely looked up from her laptop. Have fun, she said. Don't let those 20-year-old influencers convince you to start dancing on camera. At the marina, Adrian welcomed me aboard wearing navy shorts, a white polo, and the orange watch. I had come to hate that watch. He poured 18-year-old scotch and gave me a tour of the yacht, speaking with the proprietary pride of a man showing off a kingdom. On the lower deck, I recognized a cream-colored scarf tucked beside the bed. I had bought it for Lauren during a trip to Montreal. The sight of it hurt more than the photographs had. Objects don't understand betrayal. They just travel wherever people carry them. Your wife enjoy boating? I asked, keeping my voice casual. Adrian glanced toward the scarf before closing the cabin door. I'm not married. Girlfriend. It's complicated. He walked back toward the upper deck and added, she's separated. Has been for years. The ex is dragging things out. I followed him into the sunlight. That sounds exhausting. You have no idea. He poured another inch of scotch into his glass. The guy built this public image around being likable. Apparently, behind closed doors, he's controlling as hell. I looked across the marina because I didn't trust my face. That what she says? She doesn't need to say much. I've seen enough. Have you met him? Once, technically. He didn't know who I was. Adrian lifted his wrist as he took a drink, the orange strap bright in the sun. I understood then. Our 5th anniversary dinner. Lauren had told me a hotel investor might stop by because she hoped to secure a client. Adrian had entered the restaurant, greeted her like a business acquaintance, shaken my hand, and taken a photograph of us near the decorative mirror. I remembered him now, not his face but the way Lauren had watched him leave. At the time, I thought she was disappointed about a business conversation. In reality, her husband and her lover had stood 3 feet apart while she quietly enjoyed the risk. That must have been strange, I said. Adrian shrugged. Honestly, I felt sorry for him. Let me ask you to sit with that for a moment. The man sleeping with my wife felt sorry for me because of lies she had told him about who I was. I could have spoken 5 words, Lauren is still my wife, and destroyed the world he believed in. Instead, I raised my glass and said, to complicated women. He laughed and touched his glass to mine. You married. 6 years. Happy. I took a slow drink. I used to think happiness was something you either had or didn't. Now I think it's mostly what 2 people agree to pretend. Adrian studied me, perhaps sensing more beneath the answer, but I redirected him toward business. By sunset, he had offered my production company exclusive access to the marathon development if the acquisition went through. I told him exclusivity was valuable only when the story deserved attention. He asked what would make it deserve attention. I said, stakes, risk, a person people either want to become or want to watch fail. He smiled. I can give you that. I'm counting on it. When I returned home, Lauren was waiting in the bedroom wearing black silk and the perfume she had worn on our first date. For one disorienting second, I wondered whether Adrian had called her, whether the entire plan had collapsed, and whether she was preparing to manipulate me before I could speak. But she only wrapped her arms around my neck and said, I've been thinking about us. I kept my hands at her waist without pulling her closer. What about us? You've been distant. Work has been heavy. It's more than work. She searched my face with the focused concern of an actress who had noticed the audience becoming restless. Sometimes I feel like you're already somewhere else. The irony was so clean it almost felt designed. I asked, are you? Her expression shifted, just slightly. Am I what? Somewhere else. She smiled after half a second and pressed her forehead to mine. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. She kissed me, and I let the moment continue long enough to preserve the mask, but whatever intimacy we had once shared was gone. I felt as though I were standing outside myself, watching Lauren use affection to inspect the strength of her own cover. The next morning, she announced that her Chicago client needed her for 5 days. I helped her zip the gray suitcase. Maybe I should come with you, I said lightly. Her hands stopped moving. To Chicago? Why not? I can film a short piece about the old Tribune building. We haven't traveled together in months. She recovered quickly. I'd love that, But this trip will be miserable. Meetings all day, client dinners all night. You'd barely see me. I could entertain myself. Let's do Chicago properly in the fall. She kissed my cheek. Just us. I smiled and said, fall sounds good. We both knew she had no intention of letting that happen. While she was away, Rosa followed her. Lauren flew into O'Hare wearing her Miami wedding ring and entered an airport restroom. 11 minutes later, she emerged without it. Adrian met her outside baggage claim. Before they reached River North, she had put on the second band. Rosa photographed all of it. She also recorded Lauren entering a family dinner with Adrian's mother, his sister, and his nephew. A small banner inside the restaurant read, "Welcome back, Lauren." The next evening, Lauren and Adrian attended a hospitality fundraiser where the printed place card beside his read Lauren Vale. I received the photographs while sitting alone at our dining table, eating reheated pasta from the container because I couldn't bring myself to use a plate. At 9:08, Lauren called me from the bathroom of Adrian's condo. I recognized the blue tile behind her from a real estate listing Rosa had found. "I'm exhausted," she said. "The hotel put me in the tiniest room. Show me." She laughed nervously. "It's a mess. I want to see how tiny it is. Evan, I'm already in bed. You're standing in a bathroom." Silence. Then she tilted the phone toward a blank wall. "Why are you interrogating me?" I softened my voice immediately. "I'm not. I miss you." Her shoulders loosened. "I miss you too. When are you coming home?" "Sunday night." From beyond the bathroom door, I heard a man call, "Lauren." Her eyes widened. She covered the microphone, then said, "Someone's in the hall. Let me call you tomorrow." The screen went dark. 2 minutes later, she texted, "Sorry. Thin walls. Some drunk guy looking for his wife." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then I wrote, "No problem. Sleep well, baby." She sent back a red heart. By the time Lauren returned to Miami, I had enough evidence to end the marriage, enough financial documentation to freeze disputed company funds, and enough photographs to erase every lie she had told both families. But the revenge against Adrian was becoming more complicated because I had started seeing a fracture between them. He complained without using Lauren's name, describing a woman who kept promising to leave an old life but always found another reason to delay. He began texting me late at night, asking whether my channel could survive a personal scandal, whether viewers forgave people for messy relationships, and whether a man looked weak if he waited too long for someone. I answered like a friend, patiently, carefully. I told him powerful stories needed clean turning points. I told him the audience respected decisive men. I told him sometimes the person delaying your future wasn't confused. They were simply comfortable. Each sentence pushed him closer to confronting Lauren, but never enough to reveal my hand. Then Adrian gave me the opportunity one had been preparing him to offer. He wanted to invest $600,000 in a 6-episode streaming series produced through my company, with the first episode centered on his marathon acquisition. The financing would raise his profile, attract partners, and introduce him to millions of viewers. He sent draft contracts and confidential projections, eager to prove that he was serious. Miriam reviewed every page and found that the proposed investment depended on Adrian closing the marathon property through Halcyon. Rosa found something else. Halcyon's purchase funds included money from 3 silent investors who had been shown inflated occupancy forecasts and renovation estimates. Adrian wasn't merely ambitious. He was reckless and perhaps fraudulent. I could expose him immediately, but I wanted him committed. I wanted his reputation, his investors, and his future all standing on the same narrow piece of ground when it disappeared beneath him. So I acted reluctant. I asked harder questions. I questioned whether he had enough personality to carry a series. I mentioned a competing developer from Palm Beach. Adrian responded exactly as I knew he would. He invited me deeper into his operation, opened private financial folders, and even allowed my team to begin filming preliminary footage on the property before closing. Every time I withdrew an inch, he moved a foot closer. The weapon wasn't the promise itself. It was making him believe the promise had been his idea. During those weeks, I also constructed the alibi Rosa didn't know about. I booked a speaking appearance at a creator conference in Austin for the weekend. Adrian planned to host his final investor inspection aboard Second Chance. My participation would be live-streamed. I arranged a dinner afterward with 12 other creators, confirmed a hotel suite using my usual card, and scheduled a late-night collaborative broadcast. There would be cameras on me from afternoon until nearly midnight. Whatever happened in Miami that weekend, I would be 1,400 miles away in front of thousands of witnesses. At that stage, even I had not decided precisely what would happen. I only knew I wanted the option. The twist arrived before I could use it. Adrian called me at 11:36 on a Wednesday night and asked whether I could meet him at a quiet bar in Coconut Grove. His voice sounded stripped of its usual confidence. I told Lauren I needed to help my editor with a corrupted hard drive and left the apartment. Adrian was sitting alone in a rear booth when I arrived, an untouched bourbon in front of him and the orange watch lying on the table as if it had become too heavy to wear. "I ended it," he said. I sat across from him. "Ended what?" "The relationship I told you was complicated." He rubbed both hands over his face. "For years. For years of waiting for someone who always needed 6 more months. I let silence do the work." Adrian picked up the bourbon and drank half of it. "She flew down this afternoon because I told her we needed to talk. She cried, accused me of abandoning her, said she'd destroy her entire life for me." His mouth twisted. "That was when I realized I didn't want her to." "Why not?" He looked directly at me. "Because I never loved her." The answer was so blunt that even I wasn't prepared for it. "Then why stay for 4 years?" "At first, because she was beautiful and unavailable. Then because the secrecy was exciting. After that, I think it became habit." He stared at the orange watch on the table. "She made me feel chosen over another man. I liked winning. But every time she got close to actually leaving him, I found myself hoping she'd invent another excuse." He gave a hollow laugh. "What kind of man does that make me?" I could have answered honestly. Instead, I asked, "What did you tell her?" "I told her the truth, that I never planned to build a real life with her, that she was convenient because she already had somewhere else to go afterward." For years, I had imagined Lauren's affair as a grand hidden love story, something powerful enough to justify the risks she took and the cruelty she showed me. Hearing Adrian reduce it to convenience should have brought relief. Didn't. It made the betrayal uglier. She had risked our marriage, our finances, and her identity for a man who regarded her as an appointment between business trips. "How did she take it?" I asked. Adrian finally looked away. "Badly. She slapped me, threw a glass at the wall, and said I'd regret humiliating her." He exhaled. "Then she said something strange." "What?" "She said I wasn't the only one who could ruin a man's life." My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Lauren appeared on the screen. "Where are you? I need you. Please come home." A second message followed before I could answer. "Something terrible happened. I think I made the biggest mistake of my life." I placed the phone face down on the seat beside me. Adrian noticed the movement. "Your wife?" he asked. "Yes." He gave a tired smile. "At least one of us chose the right woman." I studied his face across the table, realizing how completely both of them had misunderstood the roles we were playing. Lauren believed I was still her loyal husband waiting at home. Adrian believed I was becoming his friend and business partner. Neither knew that I had been arranging the end of both stories at once. "You should go," Adrian said. "If she says she needs you, go." I picked up my phone and stood. Before leaving, I rested a hand on the back of his chair and said, "Don't worry about the series. Your personal life won't affect our deal." Relief passed across his face. "You mean that?" "Absolutely." It was the kindest lie I told either of them. When I reached our building, Lauren was sitting on the floor outside our apartment in the white dress from the marina. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks and her Miami wedding ring clutched in one hand. She looked up at me as if I were the only safe person left in the world. Then she whispered, "Evan, I have to tell you something about Chicago." I stood over her without reaching down. For 6 years, Lauren had known exactly which version of herself to present in every situation. The polished consultant at dinners, the affectionate wife in our apartment, the almost divorced victim in Chicago. But sitting on that hallway floor, she looked like all of those versions had collided at once. "What happened in Chicago?" I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She glanced toward the elevator, frightened that a neighbor might appear, then pushed herself upright and said, "Can we go inside?" I unlocked the door. Lauren walked straight to the kitchen, poured water into a glass, and spilled half of it across the counter because her hands were shaking. I waited near the island. I didn't help her. I didn't ask another question. Silence terrified Lauren because silence gave other people room to think. After 20 seconds, she filled it. "There's someone I've worked with for a long time," she began. Even then, with her second life collapsing around her, she reached for a professional lie. "His name is Adrian. He was a client at first, and then we became close. Too close." "How close?" She closed her eyes. "We kissed. I almost admired the instinct. 4 years of flights, family dinners, matching identities, a yacht cabin containing the scarf I bought her, and she offered me a kiss. Once?" I asked. "No." Her voice broke. "It happened a few times." "Did you sleep with him?" Lauren started crying before she answered, but they were controlled tears, arriving delicately enough not to distort her face. "Yes." I looked at the woman who had lied to me thousands of times and understood that truth, for her, was not a destination. It was something she released in measured doses whenever the previous lie stopped working. "For how long?" "A few months." "How many?" 7. She said it quickly, as if the precision made it more credible. "It started last winter. I was lonely, you were always filming or editing, and Adrian listened to me. I know that doesn't excuse it. I'm not saying it does." 7 months, I repeated. "Yes. And he ended it tonight?" Her eyes opened. "How did you know that?" That was the first genuine expression I saw from her. I let the question hang between us just long enough for fear to enter it. Then I nodded toward her dress. "You didn't put that on to confess to me." She looked down, realizing she was still dressed for another man. "He told me he never loved me," she whispered. "He said I was convenient." There was something almost childlike in the way she said it, as if she expected me to comfort her for being rejected by the man she had used to betray me. When I didn't move, she walked around the island and reached for my arm. "Evan, I made a terrible mistake." I stepped back. 7 months isn't a mistake." "I know. How many flights does a mistake book?" She lowered her hand. I was confused. "How many hotel rooms?" "Please don't do this." "How many times did you come home from him and get into our bed?" She pressed both palms against her face. "I don't know." "Then give me your phone." Her hands dropped immediately. "What?" "Give me your phone." "I deleted everything." "The phone in your suitcase." The kitchen became completely still. Lauren's tears stopped. Her expression didn't collapse dramatically. It emptied. In that instant, she knew the confession she had prepared was useless. "What phone?" she asked anyway. "The dark blue one you used on the balcony at 2:17 in the morning. The one connected to your Chicago life." She backed into the counter. "You went through my things? That's the defense you want to try?" "No, I just—" "Evan, let me explain." "For years." She stared at me. I continued, "River North, the fundraiser, Mrs. Vale, the second wedding ring, Adrian's mother's birthday. Should I keep going?" Her knees appeared to weaken, and she gripped the edge of the counter. All the emotion she had displayed before that moment had been built around controlling what I knew. Now that control was gone. "How?" she whispered. "It doesn't matter." "Did Adrian tell you?" "No." "Then how do you know his mother?" Her voice rose. "Have you been following me? You lived as another man's wife for 4 years, and you're angry that I verified it. I wasn't his wife. You used his name. Only socially. It made things easier with his family." "Did spending our money make things easier too?" Her face went pale. "What money?" I laughed then, a quiet, ugly sound I didn't recognize. "Still doing it. Even now." I walked into my office and returned with one of the thinner evidence folders Miriam had prepared. I placed 3 pages on the island: the transfer history, the airline charges, and the invoice from a fictional hotel consultancy that routed money into one of Adrian's companies before it paid for Lauren's Chicago condominium expenses. She looked at the papers without touching them. I can explain those. Of course you can. Some were legitimate business costs. My forensic accountant disagrees. The word forensic changed her posture. You hired an accountant? And an attorney. An attorney. Her voice cracked. You're divorcing me? You ended the marriage years ago. I'm documenting it. Lauren came toward me quickly, grabbing both of my wrists. No, listen to me. Adrian is gone. I choose you. I pulled free. You don't get credit for choosing the only door that's still open. She flinched. That isn't fair. Fair. I know what I did was horrible, but we can fix horrible things. People survive affairs. This wasn't an affair. You constructed another identity. Because I didn't know who I was anymore. You knew exactly who you were. You had different names for her. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Let me pause here, because this was the moment when I finally stopped looking for the sentence that would make Lauren understand what she had done to me. I had imagined this confrontation dozens of times. In every version, I explained the damage so clearly that she could no longer hide from it. But people who build double lives don't lack information. They lack accountability. Lauren understood my pain. She simply believed her need to escape consequences was more urgent. Was any of it real? I asked. The question escaped before I could stop it. Us. Her answer came instantly. All of it. Then why him? I was insecure. Your channel took off, people recognized you, brands wanted you, and I felt invisible beside you. She spoke faster as she found a story that sounded useful. Adrian made me feel important. In Chicago, nobody introduced me as Evan Hale's wife. I had my own identity. His last name is not your own identity. She looked as though I had slapped her. I loved you the whole time. You mocked me to him. I never mocked you. You called me controlling. You told him we were separated. You let him feel sorry for me while he slept with you. He lied to me too. That doesn't make you my victim. She began crying again, less carefully this time. What do you want me to do? Pack. Tonight. Yes. Where am I supposed to go? You built an entire second home. Pick one. The cruelty of that answer landed, but I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Lauren went into the bedroom and closed the door. For the next 40 minutes, I listened to drawers opening, hangers scraping, and occasional bursts of muffled sobbing. I remained in the living room because I didn't trust myself around our wedding photographs. She emerged with the gray Rimowa suitcase, a larger black case, and the dark blue phone in her hand. I'll give you this, she said, placing the phone on the coffee table. The passcode is 0419, April 19th. Adrian's birthday, according to Rose's report. Lauren saw recognition in my face and looked away. There are things on there that will hurt you. You should have considered that before creating them. Please don't show anyone. That request told me more than another confession would have. She wasn't most afraid of losing me. She was afraid of being seen clearly. Your lawyer can contact mine tomorrow, I said. Miriam Cole at Cole and Brenner. Lauren froze again. You hired Miriam? In Miami, Miriam's name carried weight. She handled divorces for athletes, surgeons, executives, and people who wanted private destruction conducted with public politeness. Yes. How long have you known? Long enough. Were you ever going to give me a chance to confess? You had 4 years. She stared at me for several seconds, then dragged both suitcases toward the door. Before leaving, she turned and said, You think you know Adrian, but you don't. He uses people. I met her eyes. So do you. The door closed behind her at 1:14 in the morning. I locked it, walked into our bedroom, and sat on the edge of the mattress. The apartment was finally quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. The air still smelled like her perfume. One of her earrings rested on the floor near the dresser. A half-read novel lay open on her nightstand, face down to preserve the page. Betrayal doesn't remove a person cleanly. It leaves behind hundreds of ordinary objects that haven't learned they've become evidence of a vanished life. I stayed there until sunrise. Then I showered, changed the building access code, and went to Miriam's office to sign the divorce petition. By noon, emergency motions had been filed to restrict disputed transfers from the company account. By 3, Lauren had retained an attorney and moved into a suite at a hotel in Bal Harbour. By 5, she had called me 23 times. I answered none of them. What I did answer was Adrian's message asking whether we could finalize the production agreement before his investor inspection. I wrote, "Austin this weekend. Let's sign Monday after the inspection, assuming everything goes smoothly." He replied with a photograph of Second Chance at the marina, polished for the event. "It will." The next day, Adrian called while I was filming a sponsor segment. "I need to tell you something," he said. "The woman I ended things with, she may try to contact people around me. She's unstable right now. Does she know about our project? She knows I've been talking to someone in media. Not your name, I don't think. Should I be worried? No, I'm handling it." His confidence had returned now that Lauren was no longer in front of him. She has a husband, apparently. Technically, anyway. The divorce wasn't as far along as she claimed. I muted myself for 2 seconds because the sound that came out of me was almost a laugh. Then I asked, "You only learned that now?" She admitted it during the argument. Another lie. He had met me years earlier. He knew I existed, even if Lauren had misrepresented the marriage. "Do you know who he is?" I asked. "Some YouTube guy. That narrows it down." I never paid attention. Adrian changed the subject immediately. "Monday at 11 still work?" "Perfect." He didn't recognize my name because Lauren had apparently referred to me by a channel nickname, Hale, or simply my ex, and Adrian had never cared enough to look deeper. His lack of curiosity had protected my plan almost as effectively as Lauren's lies. Before flying to Austin, I recorded a video statement with Miriam and sealed it in her office. I documented where I would be, what I knew about Adrian's finances, and why I believed his investors should review the marathon projections independently. I didn't mention what I intended to happen to his yacht. I also scheduled an encrypted evidence package to be delivered Monday morning to the silent investors, the lender financing the marathon purchase, and a financial journalist who specialized in South Florida development schemes. The package contained Adrian's contradictory forecasts, internal messages obtained legally through the production review, and footage of him boasting that the investors were buying the fantasy, not the building. That alone could ruin him professionally. But I had promised myself something more personal. Adrian had used Second Chance as the private stage for 4 years of humiliation. He had kissed Lauren on its deck, kept my gift in its cabin, and sat across from me drinking scotch while describing me as a controlling ex. The yacht was the only part of his life he seemed to love without reservation. Friday afternoon, I arrived in Austin and walked directly into a ballroom filled with cameras, creator badges, and neon sponsor displays. I posted a photograph from the stage. I did a live interview at 4, joined a panel at 6, and ate dinner with 11 creators at 8:30. At 10:06, I began a live stream from a hotel media suite with more than 18,000 people watching. My alibi wasn't merely solid. It was public. At 10:41, while I was answering a question about the most difficult abandoned property I had ever filmed, my second phone vibrated beneath the desk. One notification appeared from a number that would never contact me again. Done. Vacant. No injuries. I didn't look down a second time. I kept talking about a flooded hotel outside New Orleans, smiling at the camera while the live chat rolled past. 20 minutes later, Second Chance was discovered drifting near an industrial channel south of the marina, taking on water after what investigators would later describe as deliberate damage. Nobody was aboard. The investor presentation materials, custom electronics, and private files Adrian had stored below deck were destroyed by seawater. The yacht settled low enough that only part of the upper structure remained visible by sunrise. I won't explain precisely how it was done or who carried out the physical part. Some details should remain buried with the version of me capable of arranging them. What matters is that I chose the time, created the opportunity, and paid for the silence. I was responsible. At 11:28, still live in Austin, I received Adrian's call and let it ring. He called again, then 5 more times. I ended the stream just after midnight, took photographs with attendees in the lobby, and returned his call at 12:37. "Someone sank my yacht," he said without greeting me. His voice was frantic. "What?" "Second chance. It's half underwater near Fisher Island. Police are there now." I sat on the edge of my hotel bed and made my breathing sound surprised. "Were you aboard?" "No. Thank God, no. The inspection was moved to tomorrow morning." "Do they know what happened?" "They think someone accessed it deliberately." He went silent for a moment. "Lauren threatened me." "The woman you ended things with?" "She said I'd regret humiliating her." "Have you told the police?" "I'm about to." There it was. The second edge of the revenge. Lauren had threatened him hours before I sent her away. Adrian had heard it. The broken glass in his condo supported it. Her fingerprints and personal belongings were all over the yacht because she had lived part of her secret life aboard it. I had known police would look at her first. I hadn't fabricated evidence, and I hadn't asked Adrian to accuse her. I had simply allowed their own choices to point toward the conclusion they had created. "Be careful," I told him, "and don't say anything about our series until we know whether this affects the deal. The investors are going to panic. Then keep them calm. Evan, I need you to release something, even a teaser. If people see your company attached, the investors will know the project is still alive." I paused as if considering it. "Let's speak Monday." "I may not have until Monday." "Then use the weekend wisely." I ended the call and sat in the dark hotel room, listening to the air conditioner. I expected triumph. Instead, I felt a cold emptiness that frightened me more than anger had. This was no longer preparation for divorce or exposure. I had crossed into something deliberate and irreversible. Adrian deserved consequences, but I knew I had not acted from justice alone. I had wanted him afraid. I had wanted him to lose the object that represented his access to my wife. I had wanted one part of his life to disappear without warning, exactly as mine had. If you're waiting for me to tell you that revenge felt clean, it didn't. It felt powerful for about 30 seconds. Then it felt heavy. The following morning, Miami-Dade detectives contacted me. Adrian had given them my name because of our production agreement and told them I had recently been aboard the yacht. I agreed to speak by video immediately. Behind me, the Austin conference organizers moved through the hotel lobby, and 2 creators waited beside the elevators for breakfast. I provided my flight confirmation, conference schedule, livestream archive, dinner receipt, hotel security record, and the names of more than a dozen witnesses. The detective asked when I had last seen Second Chance. I gave him the correct date. He asked whether Adrian had mentioned threats. I said he had told me an ex-girlfriend was upset but had not shared her identity. Every answer was technically narrow and carefully true. By early afternoon, they confirmed I was not a viable suspect. Lauren wasn't as fortunate. She had returned to the marina shortly after Adrian rejected her, argued with a staff member when she was denied access, and sent Adrian 6 messages that included, "You'll lose the only things you ever cared about." Those words were emotional, not criminal, but once the yacht went under, they sounded prophetic. Police questioned her for nearly 5 hours. They searched her hotel room, reviewed her rides, and examined both phones. She was eventually released without charges because there was no proof she had touched the yacht that night. But the investigation exposed the second phone, the alternate identity, the financial transfers, and 4 years of messages with Adrian. The secret had entered official records. It was no longer hers to manage. Sunday evening, while I was waiting to board my flight back to Miami, Lauren called from an unfamiliar number. I answered because I wanted to hear what remained of her voice. "Did you do this?" she asked. No greeting, no tears. "Do what?" "The yacht." Airport announcements echoed behind me. Hundreds of people could see me standing beside the gate. I'm in Austin. That isn't what I asked. You think I arranged to sink Adrian's boat while live streaming 1,400 miles away? I think you knew things you shouldn't have known. You gave me 4 years of reasons to start looking. Her breathing became uneven. The police think I did it. Did you? No. Several passengers glanced toward me, and I lowered my voice. Then tell them the truth. The truth will destroy me. That's not the same as being innocent. She went silent. Then she said, Adrian told them everything. He told them I was obsessed with him. He said I invented our relationship. Did he? His family won't answer me. His company removed my access. He's acting like I was some stranger who followed him around. Her anger broke into a sob. He said he never loved me, Evan. Not once. You told me that already. How can you be so cold? I looked through the terminal windows at aircraft moving beneath the orange evening sky. You mistook my love for an unlimited resource. I need your help. Call your attorney. I need my husband. You should have thought about that before you made him your alibi. I ended the call and boarded the plane. Monday morning was supposed to be the day Adrian signed our production agreement. Instead, at 8 o'clock, his investors received the evidence package. At 8:15, the lender's compliance department froze the marathon financing pending review. At 8:40, the journalist emailed Adrian 17 questions about inflated projections, undisclosed related party payments, and whether Halcyon had used investment funds for personal expenses aboard Second Chance. At 9:05, one silent partner withdrew. At 9:22, another demanded an emergency audit. Adrian called me at 9:31. I watched his name flash across my phone but didn't answer. At 10:03, he sent a message. We need to talk before 11. At 10:18, someone accessed the files I shared with your production team. At 10:24, Evan, call me now. At 10:37, Lauren sent her own message. Adrian says you destroyed his deal. What did you do? At exactly 11, the time we were meant to sign, I entered Miriam's conference room. Lauren sat on one side of the table with her attorney. Her face was bare, her hair pulled back, and she looked as though she had aged several years in a single weekend. A copy of the divorce petition rested in front of her. Miriam placed the financial evidence beside it and began explaining the settlement terms. Lauren barely listened. She stared at me until her attorney asked her to focus. Finally, she interrupted Miriam and said, Did you meet him? The room went quiet. I folded my hands on the table. Who? Adrian. Yes. Her attorney turned toward her, confused. Lauren's voice became a whisper. How long? Long enough for him to trust me. The realization moved slowly across her face. She understood the meetings, the proposed series, Adrian's sudden excitement about media, and the promises he had probably repeated to her before rejecting her. You knew when I confessed, she said. I knew before he did. You became his friend. He thought so. She looked genuinely horrified. Not by her double life, not by the money, but by the idea that I had entered it without permission. Why? Because both of you believed I was too predictable to see what was happening. Miriam touched my arm lightly, warning me not to say more than necessary. Lauren leaned across the table. Did you sink that yacht? Her attorney immediately said, Lauren, stop. I held her gaze. I was speaking live in Austin when it happened. That isn't an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. For the first time since I had known her, Lauren looked afraid of me. Not because I raised my voice or threatened her. Because she could no longer tell where my knowledge ended or what I might do next. Miriam resumed outlining the settlement. We were seeking repayment of the misappropriated company funds, exclusive ownership of my production business, sale of the Brickell apartment, and a confidentiality structure that protected unreleased channel material without concealing evidence of fraud. Lauren's attorney asked for a private recess. Before leaving the room, Lauren turned back and said, You've become someone I don't recognize. I answered, You never bothered to know me when you thought I was harmless. 2 hours later, She rejected the initial settlement. She believed she could fight, preserve her consulting career, and convince a court that the financial transfers were legitimate. Adrian believed he could rescue Halcyon, blame Lauren for the questionable expenses, and distance himself from both the yacht investigation and his failed acquisition. They still thought their reputations could be separated from the truth. They were wrong. Rosa called me that afternoon with one final discovery, something hidden inside the second phone's cloud archive that neither Lauren nor Adrian realized had survived deletion. It wasn't another love message. It was a collection of voice recordings Lauren had secretly made during conversations with Adrian, apparently as insurance in case he abandoned her. In them, Adrian discussed misleading investors, using false invoices, and letting Lauren route expenses through my company because, in his words, "Your YouTube husband will never audit anything as long as you keep smiling at him." In another recording, Lauren laughed and answered, "Evan sees whatever I need him to see." Those files were about to turn their private betrayal into a public collapse neither of them could contain. I listened to the first recording in Miriam's office with the blinds closed and the volume low. Adrian's voice came through clearly, relaxed and amused, saying, "Move the marina charges through Hale Media as location research. If anyone asks, they were scouting expenses." Lauren answered, "Evan doesn't examine invoices unless they involve camera equipment." Then both of them laughed. The sound lasted less than 3 seconds. It was ordinary laughter, the kind shared by two people enjoying a private joke. But I replayed it until Miriam reached over and stopped the file. "That's enough," she said. "You don't need to keep injuring yourself to prove it happened." Rosa had recovered 27 recordings spanning almost 2 years. Lauren had made them whenever Adrian discussed money, property, or his promises about their future. She had never intended to expose him while the relationship continued. The files were leverage, a private insurance policy created by someone who trusted no one because she knew exactly how untrustworthy she was herself. In one recording, Adrian admitted that projected renovation costs for the Marathon Hotel had been reduced on investor documents by nearly $4 million. In another, he instructed Lauren to classify personal yacht expenses as hospitality research. A third captured him explaining how funds could pass through 2 consulting entities before reaching Halcyon without attracting immediate attention. Lauren wasn't a passive listener. She suggested invoice descriptions, offered access to my company's vendor accounts, and reminded Adrian which amounts were small enough that I probably wouldn't notice. That was the evidence Miriam believed could end the divorce before it became a long trial. It was also enough to place both of them in the center of a financial investigation. "These have to go to the authorities," Miriam said. "Once we submit them, we won't control where the case leads." "Do it. Evan, understand what that means. Your company appears in these conversations. You may be audited, questioned, and publicly associated with the story." "I didn't authorize the transfers." "I know. We can document that. But innocence doesn't prevent headlines." I looked at the paused audio file on her computer. For nearly 2 months, I had constructed revenge like a machine, one piece at a time, believing I could decide exactly who it damaged. Now I saw the truth. Once something became public, it stopped obeying the person who released it. "Submit everything," I said, "including the parts that embarrass me." That decision ended the secret phase. Until then, I had been fighting in shadows, letting Lauren and Adrian discover only what served my plan. The recordings changed the battle into something larger than humiliation. Federal investigators contacted Miriam within 48 hours. A forensic team examined Hale Media's vendor history, recovered altered invoices, and traced payments through Lauren's consulting entity into companies connected to Adrian. I surrendered my laptop, business phone, tax records, and 6 years of account statements. For 11 days, I couldn't access several company accounts while investigators confirmed that I hadn't knowingly participated. My production staff began asking questions I couldn't fully answer. 2 sponsors postponed campaigns. 1 canceled outright. This is the part people leave out when they fantasize about perfect revenge. Even when you have the truth, detonating it sends debris in every direction. I had built my career around appearing composed, curious, and dependable. Suddenly, strangers online were asking whether I had used my channel to promote fraudulent investments, even though Adrian's episode had never been released. My face appeared beside headlines containing words like secret wife, sunken yacht, and multimillion-dollar development scheme. For a week, I woke each morning unsure whether everything I had built would survive the day. I could have protected myself by saying Lauren acted alone and pretending I had been oblivious. Instead, I recorded an 11-minute video in my empty studio. No dramatic music, no thumbnail face, no advertisements. I looked into the camera and said, "Some of you have seen reports involving my company, my marriage, and a property project in the Florida Keys. I won't interfere with an active investigation, but I can tell you this. Financial records connected to my business were misused without my authorization. When I discovered that, I turned over everything, including information that could expose my own failures in oversight. I trusted someone I loved, and that trust was exploited. That is my responsibility to confront, but it is not my shame to carry. I didn't mention the affair. I didn't name Lauren or Adrian. I didn't defend every rumor. I showed documents confirming my cooperation, explained that the proposed series had been canceled before production funds changed hands, and promised an independent audit of my company. Then I uploaded the video and turned off my phone. When I looked again 3 hours later, it had more than 600,000 views. The top comments weren't mocking me. They were from people describing partners who had hidden debt, relatives who had stolen from businesses, and spouses who had maintained second lives. My audience didn't need me to appear invulnerable. They needed me to speak without treating them like idiots. Within a week, the video crossed 2 million views. 2 sponsors returned. A financial security company offered to fund a documentary about identity fraud and double lives, although I declined until my own case was resolved. My channel survived because I stopped trying to control how the truth made me look. Lauren made the opposite decision. She issued a statement through a public relations consultant claiming that she had been manipulated by a powerful older businessman during a vulnerable period in her marriage. She described the financial transfers as administrative work performed under Adrian's direction and insisted she never knowingly submitted false information. The statement might have earned sympathy if Adrian's attorneys hadn't responded by releasing messages that showed Lauren proposing several of the invoice schemes herself. Then Adrian gave an interview through a business publication and called her a former contractor who developed an inappropriate personal attachment. That phrase destroyed whatever loyalty she still felt toward him. Former contractor. For years of using his name, attending his family celebrations, caring for his nephew, and waiting for him to choose her, and when consequences arrived, he reduced her to a contractor with a crush. Lauren retaliated by giving the recordings to a Miami reporter before the authorities could ask her not to. She believed public cooperation would make her look like a whistleblower. Instead, the reporter published excerpts showing that she had laughed at the fraud, participated in it, and repeatedly described me as too distracted to notice. One excerpt spread farther than the rest. Adrian said, "What happens if Evan checks the Chicago invoices?" Lauren answered, "He won't. I know how to keep him feeling secure." People clipped those 11 words into reaction videos, podcasts, and short-form posts. Her face appeared beside the quote. Former clients started examining every project she had touched. 2 discovered irregular billing unrelated to Adrian, not necessarily criminal, but deceptive enough to sever ties. The boutique hotel group featured most prominently in her portfolio announced that Lauren had never been a direct employee, only a subcontractor on one small campaign. Her resume began collapsing line by line. If you've ever wondered how a reputation truly dies, it usually isn't one spectacular moment. It's a series of doors closing quietly. A recruiter stops responding. A former colleague removes a recommendation. A potential client searches your name and says the position has suddenly been filled. Lauren applied to a branding agency in Fort Lauderdale and reached the final interview before someone on the panel recognized her. She tried an independent consultancy under her maiden name, but a prospective client reverse-searched her photograph. She relocated temporarily to Tampa and joined a private networking group, only to find that one member had worked with an investor harmed by Halcyon. Every fresh start carried the same shadow into the room before she arrived. Adrian's fall was faster. The marathon acquisition collapsed when the lender withdrew. His investors sued for misrepresentation, and Halcyon's accounts were frozen during the investigation. The insurance company refused to pay the full claim on second chance because evidence showed material inaccuracies in its security and usage disclosures. Police never charged Lauren or anyone else over the sinking. Investigators questioned marina staff, contractors, former employees, and me a second time. My Austin alibi remained unbreakable. By the end of that year, the property damage case was inactive pending new evidence. Adrian suspected Lauren. Lauren suspected me. The detectives publicly named no one. Only much later, after the legal battles were over, could I admit to myself in plain words what I had done. I arranged for second chance to be destroyed. I chose an empty night, ensured no one would be aboard, and built my alibi before the first move was made. I'm not offering that as a clever trick or a model anyone should follow. It was illegal, dangerous, and born from a version of me who wanted pain translated into something physical. I escaped criminal consequences, but escaping consequences is not the same as proving an action was right. The yacht became Adrian's private punishment. The evidence became justice. I eventually learned the difference. 3 months after the recordings became public, Lauren agreed to settle the divorce. She repaid $61,000 through the sale of investments and surrendered any claim to Hale Media, my channel archive, and future production revenue. We sold the Brickell apartment. After the mortgage and disputed expenses were resolved, my share was enough for a down payment on a smaller house in Coconut Grove with a courtyard shaded by a gumbo limbo tree. Lauren received far less than she had expected because part of her share went toward repayment, taxes, and attorney fees. There was no dramatic final courtroom speech. We signed papers in separate rooms. When Miriam told me the marriage was legally over, I stared through her office window at traffic moving along South Dixie Highway and felt nothing that resembled victory. Mostly, I felt tired. That evening, I went to the apartment one last time. The walls looked lighter without our photographs, and every sound echoed because the furniture had been removed. On the balcony, the chair where Lauren had whispered into the second phone was gone. I stood in the exact place where the story had begun and listened to Miami below me. Horns, music from an open car, the distant churn of construction near the bay. I expected the empty apartment to feel haunted. Instead, it felt like a set after filming ended. The illusion was over, and there was no reason to remain inside it. Adrian eventually pleaded guilty to 2 financial offenses connected to investor disclosures and received a sentence that included home confinement, probation, restitution, and a prohibition on managing investor funds for several years. It wasn't the spectacular prison ending people online predicted. Real consequences are often more administrative than cinematic. But his professional identity disappeared. Halcyon dissolved. His partners removed his biography from old project pages. The family that once welcomed Lauren distanced itself from both of them. Adrian moved into a condominium owned by his sister and began consulting privately for small property owners who cared more about his contacts than his history. He never became the public figure he wanted to be. The closest he came to widespread recognition was the photograph of him standing beside his half-submerged yacht. Lauren avoided criminal charges after cooperating, repaying disputed funds, and demonstrating that Adrian controlled the central companies. But professional survival was another matter. She moved from Tampa to Jacksonville, then to Charlotte. Each time, she shortened her resume and changed the description of the 4 missing years. Each time, the internet eventually connected the new version of her to the old one. She sent me messages during that first year. Some were apologetic. Some accused me of destroying her life. One said, "You didn't just leave me. You made sure nobody would ever let me move on." I didn't answer because the sentence was built on the same belief that had guided her from the beginning, that consequences were something another person did to her, never something her own decisions created. She had recorded Adrian because she expected betrayal. She had preserved the evidence that exposed her because she trusted leverage more than love. She had spent 4 years building identities so carefully that once they collided, nobody knew which version of her to believe. I didn't need to chase her from city to city. The truth arrived before me. Let me be honest about my own transformation, though, because pretending I walked away perfectly healed would be one more fabricated ending. For months, I checked every invoice 3 times. I distrusted harmless schedule changes. When friends took calls outside, part of me listened for lowered voices. I went on 2 dates and found myself wondering what each woman might be hiding before I had learned anything real about her. That wasn't strength. It was fear wearing sharper clothes. So I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Samuel Reyes, a soft-spoken man in his 50s who refused to let me turn every feeling into a production plan. During our 3rd session, he asked, "Who are you when you're not gathering evidence?" I didn't have an answer. My entire adult life had become observation, camera angles, audience retention, financial records, location histories, lies hidden in reflections. I knew how to investigate a room better than I knew how to live inside one. Therapy didn't teach me to trust everyone again. It taught me that trust was not the absence of boundaries. I could ask questions without apologizing. I could notice inconsistencies without becoming a detective. I could leave at the first sustained pattern of deception instead of waiting until I possessed enough evidence to prosecute someone emotionally. Most importantly, I could stop confusing vigilance with self-respect. I changed the channel too. Luxury properties still appeared, but the videos became less interested in marble counters and purchase prices and more interested in the people who built, lost, abandoned, or fought over the spaces. Our first major documentary after the investigation examined a resort project that had financially devastated a small coastal community. We interviewed workers, local families, and investors who had been sold impossible promises. That video became the most viewed piece I had ever made. By 31, I had expanded Hale Media into a 12-person documentary studio. We produced investigative series for 2 streaming platforms, and I created a fund that provided legal and accounting consultations for freelancers whose spouses or business partners had misused shared companies. I never presented myself as a relationship expert. I simply understood how humiliating it felt to admit you hadn't seen what was happening under your own name. Helping other people separate ignorance from guilt became more satisfying than any revenge I had planned. I dated occasionally, but I didn't rush into another marriage or use a new relationship as proof that I had one. My life became quieter. I learned to cook 3 meals properly. I started paddle boarding before work. On Sundays, I left my phone at home and walked beneath the banyan trees near the grove without filming anything. For the first time since my channel became successful, I allowed experiences to exist without converting them into content. For years after the divorce, I traveled to Atlanta for a documentary conference. My return flight was delayed, so I stopped at an airport cafe near Concourse B and ordered black coffee. I was adding cinnamon when someone behind me said, "Evan." I recognized Lauren's voice before I turned. She stood beside a rolling carry-on wearing a navy uniform jacket with the logo of a regional hotel chain embroidered near the pocket. Her hair was shorter, threaded with a few strands of gray near her temples. She had lost the polished certainty that once made every room seem arranged around her. She didn't look ruined. That would be too simple. She looked smaller somehow, like a person who had spent years trying not to be recognized. Her employee badge read Lauren Bennett, Guest Services Trainer. She had finally returned to her real last name. "Hi, Lauren," I said. She studied my face, perhaps searching for anger, satisfaction, or whatever emotion would prove she still occupied space inside me. "I saw your documentary about the Oregon commune," she said. "It was good." "Thank you. You look well." "So do you." That was generous but not dishonest. She looked tired, not broken. "I'm based in Raleigh now," she said. "I travel between properties training front desk teams." "That sounds steady." She gave a faint smile. Steady used to feel like failure. Neither of us spoke for a few seconds. Travelers moved around us, dragging luggage, checking screens, living lives that had nothing to do with ours. Lauren looked toward the cafe counter and said, "I heard Adrian moved back to Chicago." "I wouldn't know." "You really don't keep track?" "No." Her eyes returned to mine. "Did you do it?" For years had passed, but I knew immediately what she meant. "The yacht." She nodded. "I used to wake up certain it was you. Then I'd convince myself I was being paranoid. I took the lid from the counter and pressed it onto my coffee. What difference would the answer make now? I don't know. Maybe I want one thing from that time to make sense. It all made sense. You just didn't like what it said about us. She absorbed that without arguing. Then she asked, "Did you ever love me after you found out?" It was such a strange question that I almost gave her a careful answer. Instead, I told her the truth. For a while, that was why it hurt. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. And now, I looked at her. The woman whose voice once made my heart race, whose absence once felt unbearable, whose lies had occupied every hour of my life, and found nothing inside me except a distant, human wish that she would stop destroying herself. Not love, not hatred, not triumph. "Now I hope you're honest with whoever knows you next," I said. An announcement called my flight. I lifted my bag onto my shoulder. Lauren moved aside and whispered, "I am sorry, Evan." Years earlier, I would have dissected the sentence, searched her face, and tried to decide whether the apology was finally pure. That day, I didn't need to know. "Take care of yourself," I said, and walked toward the gate. I didn't look back. On the plane, I took the window seat and watched Atlanta shrink beneath the clouds. I realized I hadn't asked whether she was married, whether she was happy, or whether strangers still recognized her name. Her reputation had followed her through jobs and cities, but I no longer needed proof that she was suffering. Indifference wasn't cruelty. It was the moment her choices stopped having authority over my peace. Before I finish, there are 5 things I carried out of that story. 1. When Lauren said Chicago was home, my instincts noticed the fracture before my heart accepted it. One suspicious moment is not a verdict, but a sustained pattern deserves investigation, not endless self-gaslighting. 2. Waiting to gather evidence protected my company and my legal position, but waiting should serve clarity, not become an excuse to live indefinitely inside deception. Once I knew enough, leaving was the healthy act. 3. Adrian's confession that he never loved Lauren proved that betrayal is not always driven by some irresistible romance. Sometimes people sacrifice something real for attention, secrecy, and the temporary feeling of being chosen. 4. Destroying Second Chance gave me a brief sense of control, but the financial evidence created the consequences that actually mattered. Revenge can imitate justice for a moment, yet only truth and lawful accountability let you build a life afterward. 5. Healing began when I stopped measuring my recovery by Lauren's collapse. The airport encounter mattered because I no longer needed her regret, her punishment, or even her apology to know my worth. Now I want to know what you would have done at the real turning point. Comment 1 if you would have exposed the double life immediately. Comment 2 if you would have stayed quiet long enough to secure the evidence. Or comment 3 if you think Evan crossed an unforgivable line when he arranged the destruction of the empty yacht. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I'm always amazed by how far these stories travel. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe for more original relationship dramas. This fictional story was inspired by real emotional patterns and fully rewritten in Miami to create original content. Any resemblance to actual people or events is entirely coincidental.